what I am just trying to tell, because whatever I am going to tell, it's really a very application-oriented area where you have already faced and focused the things in your daily life. Now the topic for today's discussion is processing, microstructural and mechanical behavior of metal matrix nanocomposites. This is myself, Dr. Pallav Gupta. I am basically working as assistant professor in Department of Mechanical Engineering, and I am right now also heading the IPSC cell of the department. Okay. So at the outset, I would like to thank the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Calcutta University, for inviting me to deliver this lecture over here. And just before starting this, I would like to discuss. So before that, I would like to tell about the place from which I am basically coming. I am coming from MIT University, Uttar Pradesh. This is the first block. This is the overview of the MIT University, and the second is the E block where I basically sit. E is for engineering. This is the place where I sit. Next slide, please. So this is my research group. In my research group, I am right now guiding a group of around 15 students. This is myself in the center, as you might be seeing, and I am surrounding a lot of students with me, right from BTech project students to MTech dissertation to the PhD research scholar. So a lot of students are working with me these days. So if any student from Calcutta University, he thinks about my area. If he finds my area suitable for as per his interest or her interest, then he or she can definitely contact me. My contact details are there with Hassan Jafri, Professor Hassan Jafri of your department. So if anybody wants, if anybody wants to discuss anything, then he can contact me. So the plan of address is I will be discussing something about composite material, processing techniques of the composite material, application of composite metal matrix composite material, characterization technique. That is, when we are talking about the characterization technique, there are basically two types of techniques. First is the mechanical characterization, second is the structural characterization. So when we are talking about the mechanical characterization and structural characterization, then there are various techniques which can be used for designating these properties. So when we are talking about the mechanical behavior, then we are having hardness, we are having wear, we are having the deformation characteristics, and when we are talking about the structural behavior, then we are having the accelerated diffraction pattern and the scanning electron microscopy as the tool by virtue of which we can determine the properties. Now, next, this is the composite material. Now, when we are talking about the composite, if I ask anybody what is basically composite, then everybody can be able to answer it. Because when we are talking about composite, then it is a combination of two materials. When they are mixed in certain proportion, then what happens, that it yields a new material, and the properties of that new material is different or it gets improved as compared to the base material or the parent material. I think this is the basic definition. Now, when we are talking about the composite material, then it can be classified on the basis of two types. First, on the basis of the matrix, and second is on the basis of the reinforcement which is being added. Now, on the basis of matrix, next slide please. On the basis of matrix, the composite material is of 5 types. I have written 3 types over here. First is the metal matrix composite, second is the polymer matrix composite, third is the ceramic matrix composite. So when we are talking about the polymer matrix composite, we are adding, when we are talking about the metal matrix composite, we are adding ceramic material into a metallic matrix and then processing it. In the second case, when we are talking about the polymer matrix composite, then what is there? We are using matrix of polymers and adding ceramic material into it. And third, when we are talking about ceramic matrix composite, then we are adding ceramic into ceramic so as to yield a new product which will be having an improved properties compared to the base material. Now, now there is some question marks over here. The question marks over here are because recently, when we are talking about these classes of composite material, recently new classes of composite material has also been derived. That new classes of composite material are two sort. That is, first is the carbon-carbon composite, and second is the hybrid matrix composite. Now, up to certain centuries, it was very much dilemmatic to define that what is basically carbon. May I ask in the audience, can I tell which class of material is basically carbon? Is it a metal? Is it a ceramic? Is it a polymer? Is it a composite? What is carbon? It is a non-metal. Okay. First step is correct, but which type of non-metal is that? Because when we are talking about non-metals, then polymer is also a non-metal, ceramic is also a non-metal. So, how many which type of non-metal is that? Either it is organic or inorganic? Organic. So, when we're talking about it is an organic, it is a non-metal, then we talk about the ceramic material. So carbon is basically ceramic material having a melting point temperature of around 5000 degrees centigrade. Okay. So new class of material is carbon-carbon composite because carbon is a lightweight material and it has improved properties. Now, second is important, or the fifth important point in this concern is the hybrid matrix composite, in which we are basically adding two ceramic reinforcement into a single matrix. Now, that matrix can be of polymer, that matrix can be of metal, that matrix can itself be of ceramic as well. So, when we are adding any two ceramic reinforcement, suppose we are adding aluminum oxide and silicon carbide into one matrix, then it is basically called as the hybrid matrix composite. Now, step by step we are moving. We are first having composite, we are having then metal matrix composite, then we are having hybrid matrix composite. So, these are some new classes of material which are being derived nowadays. Next slide. Now, for the because my area of research somewhere locates up to metal matrix composite, so I will be discussing about the processing technique or the manufacturing methodology which are basically used for deriving the metal matrix composites. So for metal matrix composites, we are having several techniques like powder metallurgy. In powder metallurgy technique, what is there? We are taking the requisite amount of powder, we are ball milling it, we are compacting it into a die so as to get a green shape, and then we are doing the sintering of that compact in a argon atmosphere controlled furnace or inert atmosphere so that it doesn't get oxidized. Next slide. Now, this is the liquid state method. In liquid state method, there are two methods. First is the electroplating and the second is the stir casting. So, electroplating and stir casting, there are two techniques under liquid state method. Stir casting is very promising technique because it is very much economical. In this, what is there? We take molten metal. Molten metal is basically being melted, then it is being added a ceramic reinforcement, it is being stirred, and then when it is stirred, it is being homogenized, and then we pour that molten material into a die and it solidifies so as to form a desired component product. Now, another technique for liquid semi-liquid technique is Swiss casting. In Swiss casting, what is there? There is a ram or there is a movement of the plunger from the top or from the bottom position. The material is placed inside the cavity or a die, and what happens is that when we press the plunger from the downward direction, it solidifies into the shape of the cavity which is being placed. Next. Spray deposition. Now, spray deposition is a newly developed technique which is basically an ancestral technique of thermal spray coatings. Now, what is there? Nowadays, we are facing a lot of problems of corrosion, wear on the metallic surfaces. So, when we are facing such type of problems in the surfaces of the metals and other alloys, then we have no answer to such type of problems. So, such type of problem can only be answered when we are putting any layer. So, a new technology or a new technique in which we can coat that material with some other alloy or with some other ceramic material, then it is known as the spray deposition technique. In this spray deposition, we are having several techniques like chemical vapor deposition, physical vapor deposition, and spray forming techniques. Next. Now, these are the applications of metal matrix composites. It has been used in aerospace, it has been used in automobile, it has been used in power modules, it has been used in brake components, and it has been used for piston, for cylinder bolts. In most of the applications, we are nowadays using metal matrix composites because it is a very promising material as far as the structural, mechanical, as well as electrochemical behavior is being concerned. Next. These are some of the advantages of powder metallurgy technique. Why powder metallurgy? Because I am basically a material scientist working in this area of powder processing, powder metallurgy for the last 8 years. I have published a lot of papers, and I can very easily say that it eliminates porosity, it produces a homogenized product, it provides a controlled microstructure, it gives a high volume, it gives improved properties and other designated changes. Next. Now, there are several characterization techniques which we should know for obtaining the properties of metal matrix composites. So, for obtaining the properties means suppose we are designating any material, we are developing a material, whether that material has improved properties or deteriorated properties. For this, we have to determine its nature or behavior. So, for that, we have two properties: first is structural and second is the mechanical. Next. Now, X-ray diffraction pattern is an important technique for determining the phases or the components which are present in any of the material. Suppose we have developed a new material, we have developed a new composite. This composite is basically comprises of iron and ammonium oxide. Then what happens? We have processed it, and then finally we are obtaining a new material. In order to designate or in order to derive the new compounds, we have to study the acid diffraction pattern. Now, that material which has been obtained nano size structure can also be determined using this particular technique by using the formula of Scherer. It is 0.9 lambda upon meter cos theta, by virtue of which you can also determine whether the substance or the compound which is formed it is in nano size or not. Next slide. This is the standard term microscopy. When we talk about the microscopy, then microscopy itself talks about the microstructure. So, suppose we want to determine the microstructure of any of the material. That means what is the distribution of the grain, what is the morphology of the grain, how is the variation of the material or other factors. So for that we have to use this particular technique. By using scanning electron microscopy, or before using scanning electron microscopy, we have to polish the specimen. That is the specimen.
Can you tell us about the carbon fiber that it is being used nowadays?
See, carbon nowadays has been used in several forms. One form which you are seeing is carbon fiber, carbon viscous, carbon particles, carbon nanoflakes. Several forms of carbons are there. Like you are asking about carbon fiber. Why we are using that technology? Why are using carbon fibers? Mix it out. Why using carbon fibers? Why we are using always carbon? See, the reason behind using carbon. See, why we are using carbon and what is the use of carbon technology? See, carbon. The best part of carbon is that. Okay, can anybody give what is the best part of carbon? See. First is the bonding between the two particles. What he is saying, that is the force of attraction or force of repulsion between the two particles, between the two corresponding particles which are present in any of the zone in carbon. First. Second, carbon is a very lightweight material, and nowadays we are talking about the miniaturization. What is miniaturization? That means the lightest weight material which we can develop, which is having the best properties in our today's world. The lightest weight material which we can derive or designate, which is having the best property. Now, when we talk about the best property, that means it should have high hardness, high load bearing capacity, low corrosion, and other significant things. That is that we are talking about the carbon these days. Carbon fibers, carbon nano. Because see, whenever you are adding carbon, it will improve. See, carbon itself is improved when it is being added to some other material. It will also improve the property of that material as well. In the last, I will discuss some about the experiments. I have brought one of my students. I will show you some samples that how we have done something with the carbon as well. So discuss something like that in the end of the presentation as well. Okay.
And carbon is also in steel. So what is the difference between steel and carbon fiber?
Okay. So what he is asking, what is the difference between steel and what is the difference between carbon? Okay. Steel. Can you tell me the basic composition of steel? Anybody? Steel is a combination of several materials. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Steel is having iron, steel is having carbon, it is having chromium, it is having vanadium, it is having tungsten, it is having several materials. Okay, and the percentage of carbon is very small in number. Okay, in steels it is very small number, and you are telling about 0.2%. It is for mild steel. Steels are also designated into large class: mild steel, medium carbon steel, plain carbon steel, high carbon steel, high chrome, high carbon steel. N number of steels are there, and N number of applications are there, and those N number of applications have N number of variation of the percentage of the compounds which are being present in particular composition of steel. Are you getting a point? So this is the basic idea that we are very small percentage of carbon and we are getting. Now when we are talking about carbon, then in carbon we are having majority percentage of carbon. Are you getting? Majority component of carbon or major percentage of carbon. Anything else? ब्रेकिंग पॉइंट पे कार्बन नहीं, कार्बन की वजह से ब्रेकिंग पॉइंट लो नहीं होता है। देखिए कार्बन का परसेंटेज किसी एक लेवल तक जब रखेंगे तो उतना देखिए अगर कार्बन को बहुत ज्यादा कर देंगे तो वो ब्रेकिंग पॉइंट लो कर देगा, लेकिन उसको आपको ऑप्टिमाइज करना पड़ता है। इसलिए कार्बन का परसेंटेज जो है ज्यादा रखते हैं 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, 2%। उससे ज्यादा कार्बन परसेंटेज किसी भी मटेरियल के अंदर कभी भी हम लोग नहीं रखते हैं। Any other doubt? No. So this is scanning electron microscopy. In this, what is there? We can polish the specimen and then study the microstructure. Next slide, please. This is the hardness. I think hardness which you have already done in your lab. This is normal hardness, which is not discussed. Next. This is the wear. Now wear is basically what when we are rubbing or whenever any material is being rubbed in comparison to the other material, then what will happen? The removal of the material takes place from the either from the parent surface or from the specimen surface itself. So but what happens that if the material removal takes place, then it is transferred into three stages. That is the primary stage wear, secondary stage wear, and tertiary stage wear. So these stages of wear incorporates when as the specimen moves on any of the specimen or any of the plane. Next slide. So these are the mechanisms. Now one of our students was telling, sir, how can you designate or how can you determine the type of the wear when you are studying the wear mechanism? See, suppose you have studied the wear behavior of any of the material, we search that particular specimen and study the microstructure so as to see the what